Call the Town of Fuquay-Varina Planning Board to order. We will forego the pledge considering the conditions, and I will look towards our planning director to provide information on how to participate in this meeting if you're remote.
Thank you. All attendees that have joined the meeting tonight have joined muted. If you wish to speak during the meeting, you will need to notify staff you wish to speak. If you are joining the meeting online and wish to speak, please press the raise hand button. If you are joining the meeting via phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. After you have raised your hand, staff will recognize you to speak by calling out your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. You will be unmuted at this time and allowed to speak. Once you have finished speaking, you will be muted for the remainder of the meeting. If you wish to speak again, you will need to raise your hand again.
Thank you. We'll go right to item 2A, approval of the minutes from the May 18th, 2020 Planning Board. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a correction.
Okay.
Assistant Town Manager Jim Seymour, physically and remotely present. I don't think he was physically here.
You're right, he was remotely here.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a correction to that. Any other corrections? If not, then I'll consider a motion to.
Move they be approved as written with the one exception.
With the correction, okay.
Second.
Second? Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. On to the next item. There are no items tabled from the previous meeting, so we'll go right to our public hearings. Public hearings are a time for petitioners to present requests and for the public to state their concerns and voice opinions in favor of or in opposition to these requests. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium. I guess the relative podium. You'll be expected to either sign in and state your name and address for the record. That's the important part. Before speaking in regards to the request. Due to COVID-19 state mandate, the public will only have access and input to this meeting using Zoom's social media platform. Please use the link below, which has been provided already on the agenda, to obtain information on how you can attend, participate, or view this board meeting. www.fuquay-varina.org/board meeting. Okay. So that's the blanket statement. We'll go on to item 4A, first public hearing, REZ 2020-06. Petitioner is William Barker, Barker Construction. Purpose of this agenda item is to consider a requested zoning map amendment for a total of 6.26 acres located at 201, 203, 205, and 207 East Ransom Street from the Office and Institutional O&I zoning district to the Residential High Density Conditional Zoning District, RHD-CZD, and the corresponding land use plan amendment from Town Center Residential to Multifamily Residential, MFR. Further information will be provided by staff.
Thank you. I am submitting the agenda abstract and supporting documents into the official records of the town. The subject property totals 6.26 acres and are located in the town's corporate limits. 3 of the 4 parcels are currently the site of multifamily residential buildings with a total of 36 units. The 4th parcel is undeveloped and forested. The zoning map amendment petition requests approval of the Residential High Density Conditional Zoning District, RHD-CZD, which is intended to permit proposed residential development and existing single-family dwelling units, duplex, triplex, and quadplex residential units, and to provide for multifamily high-density urban residential zoning lot development. The petitioners requested the following condition pertaining to permitted uses be made applicable to the subject properties. The following use classification groups shall be excluded from consideration as uses on the subject properties: assembly, community services, government facilities and services, medical offices and facilities, places of worship, utilities, communication, public lodging, retail sales and services, vehicle equipment, manufactured home sales and services. The petitioners requested the following site-specific condition be made applicable to the subject property: maximum density of 12 dwelling units per acre. Surrounding properties are primarily residential with a mix of densities, but also some remain undeveloped. The Bailey Place apartment complex is east of the subject properties, and individual single-family homes are to the north, south, and west. Additionally, to the west is an undeveloped property owned by the Emmanuel Holiness Church. The 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan calls for the town center residential classification at the subject properties. The TCR classification calls for property that supports a mix of densities from medium to high density in close proximity to the two downtown districts. Although the requested zoning district is not consistent with the 2035 LUP classification, the petitioner has included a land use plan amendment along with this zoning map petition, which will be described later in this report. Public water and sewer are available to serve the subject properties. The subject properties have access to East Ransom Street and Dickens Street, which are both classified by the 2035 Community Transportation Plan as local streets. Neither street is maintained by NCDOT, and as such, traffic counts are not available. The petitioner held a neighborhood meeting on May 20th, 2020 via the web. The meeting report is attached, and staff takes no position as to its content. The petitioner is requesting a land use plan amendment to the multifamily residential classification. As previously described, this current classification is incompatible with the petitioner's request of RHD CZD. The petitioner is requesting an amendment to the 2035 LUP that classifies the subject property as multifamily residential, which is better suited to accommodate the current and proposed to be continued use of multifamily residential. This supports the LUP's recommendation, LU4, encourage infill development and redevelopment inside town limits, which encourages the use and reuse of properties in town limits to promote their highest and best use. Additionally, this amendment supports H3, don't lose affordability for similar reasons. As such, the requested land use plan amendment is consistent with the 2035 LUP and its vision. The land use plan amendment, if approved, would allow for the site to be redeveloped in a more consistent and appropriate manner as it relates to the proposed use and surrounding area. Staff recommends approval of the proposed zoning map amendment with corresponding land use plan amendment. It is consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan and is reasonable and in the best interest of the public for the following reasons. 1, although the requested zoning map amendment is not consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan classification of town center residential, the petitioner has opted to request a change of the land use plan to multifamily residential, which is more appropriate to the current use, proposed use, and location. 2, the requested zoning map amendment is consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan's recommendation, LU4, encourage infill development and redevelopment inside town limits, and H3, don't lose affordability. And 3, the requested zoning map amendment would better conform to the surrounding uses and provide for the ability to better develop the property for its intended use. I'm available to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I do. Town center residential is pretty expansive, but it does not cover multifamily.
It does, but not at the density that they are looking at.
That seems kind of strange that it wouldn't provide, because it's town center residential, that it wouldn't provide that. What's the delta there? What's the difference between, if I was building TCR versus, that's not enough, what is that number, and then where do we go, and then residential high, how far up does that go? Just so I have a feeling for what, because I was really actually surprised because it seemed like it was zoned correctly, not correctly, but it was appropriately.
Land used correctly.
The land use was correct.
Right.
In the sense that, we had as a town had decided that inside, be mostly town center residential if possible, if there was residential uses, which is why I was surprised that a multifamily couldn't fit into that.
Right, I thought I had a cheat sheet here. If not, I'll look it up real quick for you.
Yeah.
I think the TCR I thought was 8. They can go much higher on what they are zoning, and that's why they did put a limit on it. Actually, TCR is 10.
Okay.
Residential high density can go up to 16 dwelling units per acre, so they have capped it at 12.
Okay. Oh, so they've kept this at 12. So they needed to go more than 10, but so.
Right.
Is there, I mean, this is maybe not for this, but maybe we should look at the TCR and see maybe if what the reasoning was for that 10 limit, and maybe see if that reasoning no longer exists, and maybe, because I guess just in my mind, the town center residential seems to be something that we would want to, especially, I mean, obviously because they aren't, it's not form-based, so we don't actually get to see any site information, but the neighborhood meeting did contain a little bit of site information. It looked like they were doing kind of a typical what we were trying to promote with the town center residential on it, like a cottage sort of a so that might be something interesting to look at. That's just a statement, not a...
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Pam, how does this term, "don't lose affordability," apply to this?
Because they're residential rental units, so they're apartments. So I think that falls into a category of affordable housing.
Is this, I was going to ask that question, are they offering anything up for like affordable housing or economy housing or anything to that nature? Or is it just that we're saying that it's
I think we're
meeting
just
that
saying that
intent because it's an
the
apartment?
category, having residential rental units, it falls under a more affordable than owning a single-family home.
But they're not actually offering any conditions for economy or affordable. I mean, those two terms, we use them interchangeable, but I don't believe
Right.
they are.
I don't think there's any
differences in those.
specific conditions. to
Yeah,
that, no.
I didn't see any specific conditions to any, like, whatever, any specific commitments to the actual affordability of whatever, you know. It may be a bunch of jewel boxes that, yeah.
What is there now?
So currently there are, you can see.
There's
Yeah, there's two buildings in
In
the
the
park.
aerial, there's actually 3 buildings.
3 apartment
Okay.
buildings.
apartments.
Yeah, I'm
So
very,
they're
very familiar with those.
So they're apartments now, and they want to basically zone it to where there's new apartments going there.
Right, so one of the issues is right now at O&I, what it is currently zoned, apartments are a accessory use, not the sole use. So this is
Sure.
basically a correction to
Yeah.
get it in the right. And they couldn't expand if, being O&I right now, since that's not really the best
Yeah,
zoning
O&I
for
doesn't really
this.
fit in the middle of a neighborhood either. It's
Yeah,
not-
yeah, it sticks, I mean, you can see it sticks out, so.
And so that's their plan, is to expand, because they just renovated, I think, a lot of those apartments back there. So they're just expanding on those parcels?
Potentially, I mean, that's not
Okay.
part of this rezoning, but
Okay.
I think that is what they presented at the neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, they did, it's interesting, it actually looks pretty interesting, but, okay. No more questions? Okay, the public hearing is now open. Does anyone wish to speak in favor of this rezoning, zoning map amendment? Anyone
Okay.
wish to speak in favor?
Yes, I got 2 hands raised. First one, Kenneth Moorfield. You may speak. Please unmute yourself.
I didn't wish to speak in favor. I had a question.
Well,
Is this the appropriate time to ask the question? or-
no, this is not a Q&A session. You can contact staff if you have specific questions, or perhaps the planning board may actually answer the questions in our deliberations, but no, but it is, if you have a view or an opinion, it is your opportunity to do that. You could state whether you're in favor or opposed. Those are the 2 options, but then you can speak to whatever your opinion is on the matter.
Okay, well, I have reservations, so I need to then raise my hand when you're taking comments.
You may go.
opposed.
You may go ahead and speak. We'll note that you're speaking potentially in opposition. So go ahead. With
Okay, I live adjacent to the property at 605 Dickens Street. Those properties, I'm concerned that adding additional properties next to that would have a detrimental effect on the density of the neighborhood as it is currently constituted. So I've contacted Barker Construction and asked them how many more units they're planning on putting in, but unfortunately I haven't been able to get a response.
Okay. Yeah, there was a neighborhood meeting, and of course, any questions can be answered by staff. You can call the planning staff at the town of Fuquay-Varina. They're glad to answer any questions and point you in the right direction. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor or opposition to this zoning map amendment?
Yes, we got one more hand. Danny Howe. Please unmute your mic.
My name is Danny Howell. I live at 2904 Plaza Place in Raleigh. My name is Danny Howell with Real Engineering. I am working for Mr. Barker and Barker Construction.
So I assume you're in
And,
favor.
Pam, thank you so much.
So I assume
Go
you're in
ahead.
favor?
I am very much in favor.
Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you for, Pam did a great job of explanation. And I just wanted to speak a little bit to, the first thing you mentioned was density. Again, we were looking at doing the rezoning to the high density residential. And the underlying town center residential going to multifamily residential there. Again, we're lowering the maximum 16 dwelling units that would be allowed under the multifamily to 12. We're not looking to do 12. We just want to make sure there was some flexibility for later redevelopment down the road by someone else. But we're going to be closer to the 10 mark, which is actually pretty compatible with some of the smaller lots that you have in the area. If you look at some of the lots around there, they average around 8 to 9 dwelling units per acre with the size of their lots. So it's actually pretty compatible. And it's a unique situation where we're located, at the end of two public streets. And then it's the back of our property. If you can see from the aerial map that's provided in front of us too, is a large floodway with floodplain. So we have a nice natural barrier between everything to the north and west. And we also have an existing apartment complex to the east, and the existing apartment complex to the east as well, and then duplexes on the right or on the east or on the west. So it's just a neat area. And again, there's existing 3 buildings there now. And again, we're just looking kind of to make it more of a complex feel. Like it was mentioned earlier, they did some remodeling a couple of years back, and we're trying to make them, more uniform and kind of cohesive is the goal of the project. So currently 201, 203, and 205 are developed as existing apartments, and they each have a building with 3-story, 12-unit apartments, and we're looking at doing similar on 207, which is currently undeveloped. So.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone
Thank you.
else wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this zoning map amendment? Any other?
I have no more hands raised.
Anyone else in opposition or in favor? Okay, the public hearing is now closed. I would look to the board for a motion, or if you have any questions.
I just have a quick question. I just want to clarify that we're just voting to rezone this, to make it what it actually should be. It's not O&I. It's O&I right now, but it's really not being used for O&I. So we're just voting to make this to what it actually should be.
Right, the petition, right, the petition is actually for, to change it from O&I to
Residential high density.
residential high density.
Okay.
So, yeah, although we as a planning board can make other recommendations if we wish to, but again, that's the request. And
A land use amendment with.
yes, this would have to, because the land use also, the land use plan also has to be changed. Yep.
Hmm.
Okay. So I would, any other questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion. Don't make me turn around and stare at you.
I will make a motion to recommend approval of REZ 2020-06 at 201, 203, 205, and 207 East Ransom Street from ONI zoning to the residential high-density conditional district and the corresponding land use amendment from town center residential to multifamily as presented by staff.
We have
Second it.
a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. A little bit of a delay on that last aye there. Okay. Oh, all right, on to the next one, item 4B. Item 4B, REZ 2020-07, petitioner is Glenda S. Top and Associates. Purpose of this agenda item is to consider a requested zoning map amendment for a total of 81.664 acres located at 12 1201 and 1291 Bowling Road and 1125 and 1121 South Main Street from the residential, agricultural, RA, and heavy industrial HI zoning districts to the office and institutional conditional zoning district ONI CZD, and the corresponding land use plan amendment from small-scale commercial center, SSCC, small lot residential SLR, and civic and institutional CIV to entirely civic and institutional CIV. Further information will be provided by staff.
Thank you. I am submitting the agenda abstract and supporting documents into the official record of the town. The subject properties total 81.664 acres. 3 of the 4 parcels are located in the town's extraterritorial jurisdiction, and the 4th is within the town's corporate limits. The southeasternmost parcel is the site of the town's decommissioned Kenneth Creek wastewater treatment plant. The 3 parcels within the town's ETJ are the subject of annexation Petition ANX 2020-07, currently under consideration by the town board. The zoning map amendment petition requests approval of the Office and Institutional Conditional Zoning District, ONI CZD. This zoning district is intended to permit public uses as well as professional and general office and institutional uses with public utilities. The petitioner has requested the following condition pertaining to permitted uses be made applicable to the subject properties. The following use classification groups shall be excluded from consideration as uses on the subject properties. 1, public and civic uses, financial institutions and medical offices and facility uses. 2, under commercial uses, public lodging and retail sales and service uses. And 3, under all residential uses. Surrounding properties are primarily residential but additionally vacant, agricultural, and religious. More specifically, future and existing single-family residential structures occupy the properties to the north as part of the South and Main and Phillips Point subdivisions, and to the south and southeast as parts of Thays Mill and Neal's Crossing subdivisions. The Faith Missionary Baptist Church occupies the property to the southwest. The 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan calls for the small-scale commercial center, small lot residential, and civic and institutional at the subject properties. Although the requested zoning district is not consistent with the 2035 LUP classifications, the petitioner has included a land use plan amendment along with this zoning map petition, which will be described later in this report. Public water and sewer are available to serve the subject properties and will be installed with future development. The subject properties are located along and have access to South Main Street, Bowling Road, and Kenneth Branch Drive. Bowling Road and Kenneth Branch Drive are both classified as local streets by the town's 2035 Community Transportation Plan and are maintained by NCDOT, but do not have available traffic count data. South Main Street is classified as a 120-foot right-of-way by the town's 2035 Community Transportation Plan. This street is identified as a 4-lane median divided road with side paths with a carrying capacity of 31,600 average daily trips. It is currently a 2-lane road with a carrying capacity of 11,200 average daily trips. 2017 NCDOT traffic counts near the property indicate a volume of 11,000 average daily trips, and 2019 NCDOT traffic counts were not available. The petitioner held a neighborhood meeting on May 21, 2020 via web meeting, and the meeting report is attached. Staff takes no position as to its content. The 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan calls for the small-scale commercial center, small lot residential, and civic and institutional classifications at the subject properties. However, the petitioner is requesting a land use plan amendment to the civic and institutional classification across the entirety of the subject properties. SSCC and SLR classifications are incompatible with the proposed ONI CZD zoning district. This requested amendment is justified and reasonable for the following reasons. 1, the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan describes the civic and institutional classification as land developed to support a building or complex of buildings that serve a public purpose. 2, recommendation CF3, safeguard our access to quality education, underscores the importance of ensuring the future of quality education in the area. And 3, the civic and institutional classification better conforms to the surrounding land use and provides a reasonable and acceptable transition to the school from the adjacent residential uses. Staff recommends approval of the proposed zoning amendment and corresponding land use plan amendment. Both are consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan and reasonable and in the best interest of the public for the following reasons. 1, although the requested zoning map amendment is not consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan classification of small-scale commercial center, small lot residential, and civic and institutional, the petitioner has opted to request a change of the land use plan to civic and institutional, which would be more conducive to the petitioner's request of the O&I CZD zoning district. The requested zoning map amendment is consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan's recommendation CF3, safeguard our access to quality education. And number 3, the requested zoning map amendment would better conform to the surrounding uses and provide a reasonable transition to the subject property from the adjacent residential neighborhoods. I am available to answer any question.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question and a statement. Questions would be, so at one point in time, I know Wake County was looking to basically rezone this property and maybe auction off the back half that butts up to Phillips Point so that it could be rezoned and be a residential and an extension of that subdivision. Doesn't appear that that's in their plans right now. So with all the talk we've had here lately with cross-access easement and public streets, and what happens with South Willhaven Drive? Is that something that the town's going to require them to route that through the school site back to Bowling Road? Does it end into a cul-de-sac? How do you see that working now at this point? Because I don't think the school necessarily wants a public street coming right in the school.
Sure.
And I'm also sure the residents don't want
Right.
people cutting through their neighborhood to get into the school. But from an EMS and from a public safety concern, it would be nice to connect those two dots.
Right. So it's a two-part question, two-part answer.
Sure.
First part is the option if they were to sell off the back end or use that for different development, that would have to go through a rezoning at a separate time. So that is always an option, but that would not be obviously included in this rezoning
Sure.
right now. So that would be something at a future time with future conditions and things like that. That would be something we could take under consideration. As far as the connectivity, that will be something that will have to be worked out. We do not support dead-end stub streets,
Yeah.
just as a general statement. So I think there will be some creative solutions to circulation through the school system and meeting our cross-access,
Yeah, I can see this being
requirements.
problematic. I was kind of surprised when this one came through that we didn't see some sort of split zoning where they had decided which piece they didn't, because it's, 80-some acres, and I know that they have plans for a middle school and an elementary school out here, but still kind of larger than what they need. So it's just, that's definitely something that I think needs to be looked at, because that neighborhood's gonna
That
be
would
impacted
definitely be
one way or
something-
another.
Right, that is taken under consideration, either if they do choose to move forward and rezone a portion of the property later, or when they come in with the site plan for the school.
Gotcha. And then the statement would be, is on their map they have here, it is not Landon Meadow Way, it would be London Meadow Way, so they may want to get that corrected. That street's named after my daughter, is why I know.
Aw.
You get the spelling right. A question on the zoning in the future, once we rezone it though, isn't there essentially, they have to let some time pass before they can rezone it? It's not like they can just turn around, sell it, and then rezone it 3 months from now.
Yes,
There's at least an annual, a year?
I think so.
I think it's a year
Yeah.
moratorium on, or, you can only get a piece of property rezoned so many times in a year. So I think that it sounds like they're committed, at least for the near term, to doing this. And then also, it's not clear to me whether the Wagstaff Road extension there, does that actually butt up to, in other words, would they be required to do that frontage piece if they developed that property, or is there enough space for them to avoid it altogether and it's all on that other property?
Right, on these maps, it appears that it's just north of that property line.
It does. I think that's kind of, it's like, oh, that's too bad they couldn't at least build half of it. But that might be something to discuss when you're doing site plans.
Right.
So, I just wanted to figure that one out.
And that brings up an interesting point. Isn't that property, the property that's just north of it, that just went through a rezoning, did it not?
Not to
For
my.
townhomes,
Yeah, the RMD, CZD.
pretty sure that
piece?
just went through
Yeah,
rezoning
that
not
looks-
too long
That does
ago.
look familiar, I don't know.
And I'm pretty sure they rezoned it the way they rezoned it, so they didn't have to realign Wagstaff at the front, why the RMD, CZD is
Oh,
pushed
South
back.
Main, so actually South of Main does have a connection that goes through. I believe South of Main is providing the cross. Now, the tricky thing I believe with South of Main is South of Main does not go to Main Street.
Yeah, the gentleman didn't want to
So
sell
they
it.
are
spite of the-
providing that east-west connection, but it, at this point in time, will not connect all the way through.
Yeah, we got a
So-
little orphan.
So that is provided on the parcel north of it.
Yeah,
Which kind of all makes it more important to connect that South Willhaven Drive back to Bowling to make that, because you're not going to get that other connection for a while, I would
And
think.
those are issues obviously at site plan.
Sure, it's just
They
something now
will-
at zoning where we have to kind of, we don't get to look at the site plan, but it'd be interesting to know from the applicant if they're on the phone, what their plan is for that, because that's going to get tricky. I mean,
Yeah.
we go through this with with churches here recently, but schools and churches kind of play with similar rules, and you have children and trying to separate out the public versus the children and maintaining that. Those things are kind of symmetrical. I think when that other project came through here with the cross access, when they wrote that, the code change that they wanted, it was for churches and for schools because they operate very similar, and we have a very similar situation here right now.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, when the site plans, that they will have to be compliant to our requirements.
So, I mean, to that point, at this point right now with our requirements, what they are, and I know that the other case hasn't gone through from board to approve it yet, would we require them to take South Willhaven Drive and tie it to Bowling, or or through the site, or what would we require them to do at this point?
I mean, obviously, we require a connection A to B. How you get to A to B,
They could do a public street that runs parallel with the northern property line and run all the way around, but they would still, I guess my point is, they would be required to do something to make that connection.
at some point, something is going to have to be done.
Got it.
Since we're looking at the transportation plan here, the Kenneth Branch Drive, where it squiggles into the old waste treatment plant, is that actually street, or is that just a showing that what that drive is? Is that actually Kenneth Branch?
I think it's just a private road at that point.
It's a private-
does
yeah,
not
it's a
look
private-
like a public right of way.
Right, so when we did the transportation plan, it was showing on the maps, but it's not really an actual street, so it's probably something that will disappear when that site is
Right,
rebuilt.
and schools have a lot of other, I mean, stacking distance and,
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah,
of other
there's-
things that get
yeah.
taken into consideration.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of is that, then, because we also have connections down there, and I'm not certain what's the connector that's coming down on the back end there? I'm trying. I don't see,
Is that a greenway?
is that a greenway? Well, this is it.
Shown on the legend as a greenway, I was wondering what.
Yeah, we've had greenways not show up the right way before.
Yeah.
But, yeah, because it squiggles too much to actually be a road.
And it runs
And that's going right along the stream, so. I think
Yeah,
that's what it is.
that's, so, okay, so that's a greenway, so then that's not really a road. All right, okay. But yeah, I'll tell you, that going Wagstaff and making it cut all the way over to Anger Road there, that connection would be really nice to start making some progress on. But
Yeah, Kenneth Branch Drive is an old gravel.
Yes.
yeah, no, it all,
It looks like a farm road.
Yeah, it is.
well, it is,
It's pretty rough.
yeah, it is pretty rough. Okay, any other questions from the board before we start the public hearing? Okay.
Ma'am, I just want to note that we've talked about roadway connectivity. I would encourage you, as you're reviewing site plans, to emphasize pedestrian connectivity to that school site as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially, obviously, with that proposed greenway.
Yeah, that's a good option for them. Like a lot of work with that old sewer plant. So.
It's another one of those safety things too, because when you start getting into greenways with schools that connect into subdivisions and those aren't really regulated, how does all that stuff tie in? It gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that, I mean, those are all issues that need to be really hashed out with the site plan once we
Sure.
see what their proposal is.
And I'm sure the planning department will represent the best interests of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its citizens.
Always.
Okay. Okay, I will now open the public hearing. The public hearing is now open. Does anyone wish to speak in favor of this zoning map amendment yeah, it says consistent, so zoning map amendment. Anyone wish to speak in favor?
Yes, we have one hand raised right now. Glenda Top, please unmute yourself, and you may speak.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Glenda Top with Glenda Top and Associates, and I am a planning consultant representing the school board who are the owners of the property. And again, I want to thank the board for the opportunity to speak tonight. Pam did an excellent job going over the key items, so I just would like to touch on a couple of key points. As was pointed out, one of the major policies of the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan is safeguarding the town's access to quality education. The continued population growth requires the provision of public educational facilities for school-aged children. The proposed uses, including the school, are an excellent fit for this location. The proposed O&I conditional zoning district request provides the necessary safeguards to protect the surrounding property owners. The site has access to a major road, and the proposed rezoning serves the educational needs of the residents of Fuquay and will be a benefit to the community. In discussing the town's land use plan, as staff pointed out, the requested the request is not in conformance with the current land use plan. So we have requested a change from what it currently is to civic and institutional, which again is conducive to our rezoning request. Given the development patterns in the area, a school and the other uses that are identified in this rezoning, we feel are appropriate for this location. I do want to point out that in doing a land use plan for a town, specific sites for future schools are not identified. Basically, as growth occurs within a community, the school system looks for sites that meet certain criteria. And some of those criteria are the availability of property, the surrounding land uses, and of course, proper access. And the school board feels that we meet all these criteria in identifying sites for appropriate schools. The civic and institutional land use classification better conforms to the surrounding land uses and provides a reasonable and acceptable transition to the school from the adjacent residential uses. And also we believe that the proposed land use category is compatible with the other land use designations in the area. In summary, the proposed rezoning, along with the proposed land use plan amendment, is consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan, and we feel that both are reasonable and in the best interest of the public. We are in support of the proposed rezoning, and we ask for the board's support. Would also like to note that there are staff members with the school system who are also available to answer any questions that the board might have. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of this zoning map amendment and land use plan amendment?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. Anybody wish to speak in opposition? Just make sure we don't have any out there. Anyone in opposition?
I see, well, we got one.
Okay.
Okay. Debbie, please unmute your mic.
Yes, this is Deborah Golden, 1100 South Willhaven Drive. And I'm on the corner of Jones Haven and Willhaven, and my neighbor is here with me, Marilyn Kresge, and she lives across the street. And we're both opposed the extension of South Willhaven.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else either in favor or in opposition to this zoning map amendment or land use plan amendment? Anyone else in favor or opposed?
Yes, we have one more.
Okay.
Wiseness, that's what it's showing up as. Please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me? I don't know if I'm
Yes, we can hear you fine.
available.
Thank you. Could you state your name and address for the
Okay.
record, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, I'm very sorry. This is Peggy Owen, and I live in Phillips Point on Genwood Court, which is right across the way from the Willhaven and all of that going on. I actually, and I'm very unsure of how to do all this, but I am very much against the development, mainly because it's taking a road or street like Willhaven and some of the other ones and making it a private, community-based street and turning it into a public access. And I just think for Phillips Point and our future, I think that is a detriment to our property values and also our safety. We have kids that play outside, and the roads are not set up for massive amounts of people. They're set up mainly just for the community. And I just think a lot more needs to be looked into before this process goes through. And I hope that's okay.
Thank you. That's exactly what this is for. Thank you for your views.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak in opposition or in favor of this rezoning?
Yes, sir. We have one more. Miss Betty Parker, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Betty Parker, Senior Director of Real Estate Services for the Wake County Public School System. I tried so hard to remain quiet, but with the questions on the Willhaven connection, I'm happy to shed a little bit of light on what our current thinking is. With all due respect to Ms. Davison, we still have miles to go before we have site plan submittal, and we have not had an opportunity to work through any details with staff. I will share that in the preliminary concept planning utilized when we brought the property forward for acquisition for approval by the Wake County Board of Education and the Wake County Board of Commissioners, it didn't reflect our expectation or desire to extend Willhaven Road for several reasons. One is that there are some significant environmental constraints in that area. There's some streams that will be difficult. The second was the reason that the planning board member mentioned earlier. Our hope is that we'll be able to utilize a portion of that property as surplus. We've been in some preliminary discussions with the town on the potential for a park or other comparable use, or perhaps residential expansion. We have not determined that yet, but we do not have immediate plans for developing that area near the end of Willhaven. The other reason that was mentioned earlier, and staff is correct, Kenneth Branch Road was an access easement for the town to the Kenneth Branch wastewater treatment facility. When the school board acquired the land and the easement, it ceased to exist as a road for anything other than private access purposes, and of course to provide town access to the sewer facilities. I think, as Ms. Davison mentioned, that's most likely going to be taking on a character in our vision as a private drive to provide the parent queuing that NCDOT requires of us. So we appreciate the input of our neighbors on Willowhaven. It's our intention also that not be a school access. School traffic can be quite heavy, especially on a neighborhood like that, and it's not what we intend. We'll know more as we proceed through the planning process, but I did want to offer at least what we have offered publicly before so that the planning board is aware. I'm happy to answer any questions the planning board may have, and thank you so much for the opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in favor or opposition to this rezoning and land use plan amendment?
Yes, we got a hand raised, showing up as Fuquay-Varina Toastmasters. Please unmute your mic.
My apologies. That's what I'm logged in as, and that's what I'm getting ready to join here in about 15 minutes. My name is Zach Roscoe. I live at 300 East Quailwood Drive, so I live in Phillips Point as well. And the last speaker put me at ease a little bit there, so thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm kind of on the fence, not really swayed or opposed at this point. I think it's a difficult thing to wage opposition without having concrete information. And I guess my fear is that at this point we're speaking about rezoning with such a lack of concrete information. It is good to hear that the ultimate plans do not involve extending South Willhaven Drive. I guess the only opposition would be not knowing that for sure. Because to my knowledge, once the zoning goes through at that point, the public really doesn't really have input at that point. I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
Well, you'll always have input through your town board of commissioners. I can tell you that. But the site plan process does not have a public hearing. You're correct. Anything else?
That's all for me. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, anyone else in favor or opposition to this rezoning?
Yes.
And we heard the information on Willhaven, so if it's, hopefully if there's other discussion, it would be on another topic besides the extension of Willhaven.
Yes, we have Betty Parker again.
Yeah, if somebody's already had their input,
Sure.
yeah. But I appreciate her off. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. The public hearing is now closed. I would look to the board for, if you have any questions or any discussion.
I have more questions. I'm going to be the one that stirs the pot today. Do you think if we did Phillips Point today, I mean, Betty mentioned streams, I haven't looked at it yet, but at this point, if we were to do Phillips Point based off the new ordinance and the way the ordinance is now, do you think we would have required that to be a stub street? I mean, I've always thought the neighborhood has quite a few stub streets, but the question is now with this ordinance, if you guys were looking at it now, would that be a stub street? Because I think this is going to be I personally think this is a great location for a school. I think it fits the bill 100%, but I think we still run into this issue that we've run into with churches and schools where you have these stub streets because you have these large parcels of land, so we put stub streets to them, and then now we go, what do we do with the stub street? Because if anything, South Willhaven could be a cul-de-sac, and that, again, not the greatest thing for public safety, but better than just a dead-end street hanging out there. Same thing with London Meadow Drive, because we're going to have the same thing on that end, kind of. And maybe even more so just because I think the school's going to want to be pushed further towards 401 and towards Bowling Road and less towards Phillips Point. So what are the options with those streets? Because you hear from the residents and then kind of knew that residents weren't going to want that, and the school probably doesn't want that, but we have a duty on the board side, and the town board has a duty to look at it as a holistic approach for the town. If public safety is of concern, then we have to look at that.
Right.
So if we wouldn't require a substreet now, is there any provisions or anything we can do to like cul-de-sac those streets at this point? Would that be something that could be entertained and still meet the ordinance of connectivity and all those good things?
We'll see, and that's a tough thing, and obviously we don't have site plans, and
Yeah.
we don't know what circulation looks like. The board in general does not support just abandoning substreets, so something will have to be done to rectify the situation, whether it is cul-de-sacking it. I mean, the CTP does call for some sort of a connection through there, so a solution will have to be come up with at the later time. I mean, obviously there are a lot of variables that go into this, where the school exactly is going to be, what the circulation pattern is through the school, where the queuing is for the school, what the school will choose to do with any of that surplus land that is not developed as the school property. That could open up other opportunities to route traffic, not through the school, through something else. So there's a lot of variables at this point in time. Just abandoning the stub street as is probably not going to happen.
Sure. I mean, it doesn't
So-
make any sense. Yeah, I mean, I think you can get creative and do cul-de-sacs where you have maybe big greenway access that could be for EMS vehicles or something like that. If you get a situation where you have to get down in there, it's just, this is one of those hard things where you're trying to approve a use that makes perfect sense,
Mhm.
but you got these technicality things that you can't take into account because you don't have anything that tells you what you're gonna do.
Right.
But knowing the background of, and knowing how things get laid out, I can tell this is gonna be a difficult problem to solve.
Right.
With the tools that you guys have.
Right. And once we have a
And what
better
are we
idea of
backing
what the
ourselves
use
into?
and the circulation patterns are on this site, maybe some other opportunities will arise.
Yeah, I mean, because, we've got something that's going before the board that, talks about cross-access, and depending on how that gets approved, it may impact this, and it's just it's really hard to look at it that way, and not knowing all the,
That's why we
how
love
it plays
master
out.
plans, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah,
this one's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. I think if we look at, in my view, if we look at this from a view of where does this problem get solved, and I think with the site plan is where it really gets 100% solved. And it may be that when they're doing the site plan, they put in a CTP change to close out that stub street and move something somewhere else as a sort of a trade-off, right? Or in this particular case, I think we actually have the option of, if that's sold off and rezoned as residential 2 or 3 years from now, boy, then we would really be hurting if we didn't leave that stub street in there so that there could
Has
be
access.
access. Because right now, if you cut it off and tried to make a parcel there, it would be a fairly isolated parcel. You get to it from the Greenway and Kenneth Branch, right?
Yeah, I think there's got to be something. I support the zoning. I just think that there's got to be something done. Right now, at this point, the only mechanism you have is conditions, or the way that the properties get zoned, or you do a partial zone or something, or you subdivide that piece out. And somehow you got to do something at this level to protect everybody moving forward. Because if we vote on this thing and say, yeah, it makes sense, relying on the fact that it gets worked out at site plan and then it doesn't, or we route traffic through the subdivision, even though that's not what the school wants or what the neighborhood wants, but that's what our ordinance and what the tools that allow you guys to actually administer that are there, then we've kind of done ourselves a disservice. I think there needs to be some looked at of some conditions of how to solve this problem globally at the zoning level, just to give everybody a little bit of comfort knowing that there's not this open-ended thing that we're voting on.
The tough thing is, at this point in time, we don't know exactly where the school's going. We don't know what's going to happen to the
I think that the
surplus.
school's gonna have to do some early on planning, maybe more so than what they normally do, to get some of those answers up front. I mean, private developments do that all the time, where you have to spend a little bit to figure out what it is you want to do up front when you're going through those zonings, so that you may have to make some of those conditions in there. And I think this is one of those situations where that needs to happen. Again, I think the zoning makes perfect sense and the use makes perfect sense, but the execution of it it's hard to support without knowing anything more than that.
Well, I guess that's where I see, I agree, except that I think the site plan process is what takes care of that. The nice thing about our form base is we get to see the site plan before we do this, or during the zoning. And in this case, there's not enough information to do that, so.
Yeah, and I understand that. My position, my problem is that staff only has so many tools they're allowed to use. If our ordinance says that they have to make cross-connection from South Willhaven to Bowling Road or to another public access way, and that's what they have to administer, and we approve a zoning change, then staff has to do that. They don't.
I don't think it does, though. I don't think that they're.
Well, I think that's.
They're not bound by the strict wording of the ordinance, possibly, but then, again, if you change the transportation plan, if you put in a site plan that proposes something and gets approved by the board to say, yes, normally we would expect a cross-access here, but we're not going to do it because we've traded that off for something else.
So we vote on that without a transportation amendment before us?
Well, we can't make those, the planning board makes recommendations on zoning and use, right? We can't, and on site plans that are presented to us. I don't know that we can necessarily make a recommendation that the site plan of something that we rezone, as a matter of fact, that would, I think, actually conflict with what our
Sure, but you can have,
purpose is,
but
right?
we can't have foresight to know what our staff has the ability, that we've given them the ability to do. We know that we've got to make from point A to point B.
No, well,
We know that. We had that answer, correct, Pam? We've got to make from point A to point B. We got a stub street come from here, and then we don't abandon stub streets. So we're approving a zoning without a site plan, which we always do, and I understand that.
Yeah, we don't, well, actually, sometimes we abandon stub streets in the site plan. That's where we would do that, right? The staff would make a recommendation that we abandon that and trade it off. Usually it's a trade-off, right? You trade it off for something else. That's where that actually happens. So right now, we can't say no stub street because we don't know But at the time when there's an actual site plan, we know what's gonna go in there. The other point is, and this is pretty clear about the transportation plan itself, is that all of the cross connects are suggestions. They're suggested that you need a point A to point B, you can figure out how to do it yourself. And sometimes we had some where we actually, as part of the site plan, they decided to eliminate not just a stub street, but to eliminate a whole connector. I remember we did one up on Hilltop Needmore recently, where it was like there was, we thought we were going to need it, but when they did the site plan, they discovered, if we develop it this way, there is no need for that connector and nobody loses, and so that they go away. So those aren't hard, it's not like you actually have to grind the road down at that level. So I think there's a lot of flexibility, and I think the board and the ordinances give planning staff a lot of flexibility to do these trade-offs. And, it's a matter of, I think at the zoning and land use level, we can just make, and again, even at the transportation plan level, we just make general statements of this is the kind of direction that it should go. But site plans, we want the partners that are developing these to be, including the school system, I think, to be creative, to say, we got special problems, we've got queuing problems, we've got safety for the children problems, we want access for people to be able to walk to these, so they got greenway issues. So what if they trade that off for a greenway and do something else, or that they do sell that off, and then somebody comes up with a nice form-based thing, comes up with a site plan, and we rezone it next time with a real great, I guess I think that's where I see this.
I understand all that. I think all that makes perfect sense, but at the same time too, if there's not something that shows a hardship that you can do that, the question I guess I would have for Pam or for staff would be, do you have a mechanism in the ordinance, the way the ordinance is currently written right now, that would allow us to close off one or both of those stub streets with some mechanism, whether it be a cul-de-sac or something, without running a public street through the school's property? Is there a mechanism in the ordinance that allows you administratively to do that?
Well, it is not required to be a public street either, so.
Well, or with a cross-access easement, however, but to allow.
I mean, cross-access at some point.
I mean, it could be gated, but I mean, do you feel like from the staff level, do you administratively have enough authority where you feel confident when you're looking at the site plan that this problem could be worked around to make kind of the best situation?
On the flip side, I don't think we are in a position, not knowing what the future use of all of that land is and seeing a site plan, we would be in a position to either restrict or abandon things because we don't have enough information.
Yeah, I'm not saying we restrict them. It just seems like there's got to be some way. I don't know.
There is a precedent.
If you feel like
alternative compromises have been worked out.
I guess if as long as you feel like on this, you guys administratively have enough authority outside of the ordinance to make sure that you can do those things, then I'm perfectly comfortable. I want to make sure you guys have those tools.
Ed brings up a good, High Grove Oaks is the one you're referring to. We ended
right.
up cul-de-sacing because in the end, we felt adequate cross-access across the subdivision was taken, and that the environmental impacts of an additional access point, going through that subdivision was not needed.
Okay.
And we went ahead and I believe we even adjusted the CTP
I think
to
the
show that.
planning staff, feels especially in these kind of situations, feels especially empowered to come up with creative solutions and bring them in front of the Board of Commissioners to address these issues and make it and like that one, that was a win-win situation, I mean, I was the first one to jump up, and what do you mean you canceled? I mean, you remember that. So what do you mean you canceled? But it made sense when you looked at it and how the site was designed. It made sense to abandon that. There was no need for it. And as a matter of fact, it would have been detrimental to the public interest to actually make that connection that for a long time had been in our transportation plan. So I guess, and I think that's where we've been moving towards trusting the planning staff to, understand that these are flexible so that we can have creative solutions, whether they come from the school board or the schools or or private developers to answer these questions. I think the other thing is it's very clear, and it'll be clear in the minutes, it'll be clear in general that there were a number of citizens were concerned about that extension of Willhaven, and I think the planning staff will take that into account when they start looking at site plans. That information doesn't go away. It's pretty clear, and I appreciate the citizens standing up and putting up what they want to do. So at this point, I will entertain a motion if we can get one, unless there are more questions or discussion. there any concerns with supporting this, or do we want to try to come up with some sort of an option?
I support it. I think it's a great
Okay.
use. And in my concern, I have full trust in staff. I just want to make sure that I know that they have to administer the ordinance. And as long as staff feels like they can administer the ordinance and work out that solution, I think I'm good with it. I think the use is great.
Yeah, no,
Stub streets are always an issue, and they always become a much bigger issue when you start running public streets into access easements across public facilities like educational facilities, anywhere where you have lots of children. So, I mean, all those concerns are all valid. So this one's just unique because it actually has 2 stub streets to it. And then it fronts kind of 2 other streets. So it gets to be a little bit messy.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of REZ 2020-07 as presented by staff.
Second.
Did you add the land use plan amendment?
And the land use plan amendment.
And so we have a motion, second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and we are on to the next one. Item 4C, public hearing for REZ 2020-08, petitioner Par 5 Holding LLC. The purpose of this agenda item is to consider a requested zoning map amendment at 7086 and 7088 Kennebec Road and 1729, 1733 NC 42 Highway from office and institutional O&I zoning district to the general commercial conditional zoning district, GC CZD, and the corresponding land use plan amendment from small scale commercial center, SSCC, and large lot residential, LLR, to entirely small scale commercial center, SSCC. Further information will be provided by staff.
Thank you. I'm submitting this agenda abstract and supporting documents into the official record of the town. The subject properties total 1.946 acres and are located in the town's extraterritorial jurisdiction. The properties are currently the site of a single-family home and its associated outbuildings. The zoning map amendment petition requests approval of the General Commercial Conditional Zoning District, GCCZD. This zoning district is intended to permit a mix of high-intensity, non-residential development of retail, office, institutional, employment centers, and service uses. This district is generally located at intersections of and along arterial roads, including freeways, expressways, parkways, and boulevards, and major thoroughfares serving an area of 2 miles or greater. The petitioner is requesting the following conditions applicable to the use of the subject properties. Only the following uses shall be permitted: banquet hall, cultural adaptive use, conference center, bank or credit union, medical offices, greenways, restaurant, food service and sales, office, business and professional, bed and breakfast, inn, indoor recreation, retail sales and services, bulk good retail, health spa, personal service, seasonal outdoor sales display, shopping center, vehicle parts and accessories retail, accessory units, business incubator, flex space, and animal hospital veterinary clinic. Surrounding properties are a mix of commercial and medium-density residential uses. To the north, south, and west lie single-family residential homes and undeveloped farmland. Across the intersection to the northeast lies the Willow Springs School Park, an extension of the Willow Springs Elementary campus. Additionally, to the east and southeast are multiple commercial properties and single-family homes beyond those. The 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan calls for the small-scale commercial center and large lot residential classifications at the subject properties. The LLR classification calls for property that is typically formed as a neighborhood for single-family detached homes with uniform housing densities. The small-scale commercial center classification is consistent with the proposed zoning map amendment. Although the requested zoning district is not consistent with the 2035 LUP classification of large lot residential, the petitioner has included a land use plan amendment along with this zoning map petition, which will be described later in this report. Public water is available to serve the property. Public sewer is not available at this time. The subject properties are located along and have access to Kennebec Road and NC 42 Highway. the former of which is classified as a local street and the latter of which is classified as a 120-foot right-of-way by the 2035 Community Transportation Plan. Although Kennebec Road is a local street, it is maintained by NCDOT, and therefore 2015 NCDOT traffic counts are available and indicate an average daily trip of 3,500. 2019 traffic counts are not available. NC 42 Highway is identified as a 4-lane median divided road with side paths with a carrying capacity of 40,500 average daily trips. It is currently a 2-lane road with carrying capacity of 20,200 average daily trips. 2017 NCDOT traffic counts taken approximately 1 mile east of the property on NC 42 indicate a volume of 15,000 average daily trips. 2019 traffic counts are not available. The petitioner held a neighborhood meeting on May 21st, 2020 via web meeting. The meeting report is attached and staff takes no position as to its content. The petitioner is requesting a land use plan amendment to include the entire property under the small-scale commercial center classification. As previously described, the LLR classification is incompatible with the petitioner's request of GCCCD. The petitioner is requesting an amendment to the 2035 land use plan that classifies the subject property as entirely SSCC, which is better suited to accommodate the proposed use of commercial. This amendment supports the LUP's recommendation CF1, invest in existing growth areas, which encourages development along growth corridors like NC 42 Highway. As such, the requested land use plan amendment is consistent with the 2035 land use plan and its vision. The land use plan amendment, if approved, would allow for the site to be redeveloped in a more consistent and appropriate manner as it relates to the proposed use and surrounding area. Staff recommends approval of the proposed zoning map amendment with corresponding land use plan amendment as they are consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan and reasonable and in the best interest of the public for the following reasons. 1, although the requested zoning map amendment is not consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan classification of large lot residential, the petitioner has opted to request a change of the land use plan to entirely small-scale commercial center, which is more appropriate to the proposed use and location. 2, the requested zoning map amendment is consistent with the 2035 Community Vision Land Use Plan's recommendation CF1, invest in existing growth areas. And 3, conditions proposed by the petitioner effectively limit future development so that it's compatible with the surrounding areas. I am available to answer any questions.
Any questions? No. All right, the public hearing is now open. Does anyone wish to speak in favor of this zoning map amendment and land use plan amendment?
Yes, we have one hand. Thomas Neville, please unmute your mic. Thomas, you can go ahead and speak.
Hello?
Their mic is unmuted, but I'm not hearing any audio from them.
Okay, we'll go on to the next then. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this zoning map amendment and land use plan amendment?
I see no other hands.
Okay. Do we want to try that
Yeah, we'll
person
try
again?
one more time.
So let's try them one more time, see if they've corrected any technical issues on their side.
Okay, Thomas Neville, we've unmuted. You can talk. Please unmute your mic. Their mics.
Okay. So let the record show that we gave every attempt. So do we have anybody else in favor of it or in opposition? No more hands up?
I see no other hands.
All right. The public hearing is now closed. Any questions or anything else? I guess that didn't generate any questions, so I look forward to the board for any motions or where do you want to go with this?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of REZ 2020-08 as zoning amendment for 7086 and 7088 Kennebec Road, and the corresponding land use amendment as presented by staff.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, public hearings are now completed. Other business, item 5A, sub PR 2019-05, preliminary subdivision, the Oaks at Kenneth Creek. Purpose of this agenda item is to consider a preliminary subdivision plat submitted by the firm McKim and Creed, called the Oaks at Kenneth Creek subdivision, located at 1049 Leatherstone Lane. Further information will be provided by staff.
Thank you. I'm submitting the agenda abstract and supporting documents to the official records of the town. The submitted preliminary subdivision, the Oaks at Kenneth Creek, is located at 1049 Leatherstone Lane on 12.68 acres in the residential medium-density zoning district. The preliminary subdivision plat proposes 20 residential lots meeting the standard for conventional subdivision developments. The minimum lot size permitted is 10,000 square feet. The minimum provided is 15,047 square feet, with the average lot size around 19,876 square feet. Although not required, 1.87 acres of open space is provided. Vehicular access to the project is provided via a continuation of public streets Leatherstone Lane and Stable Fern Drive from the adjacent subdivision, the Ridge at Kenneth Creek. Both Leatherstone Lane and Stable Fern Drive are classified as 50-foot right-of-way on the town's 2035 Community Transportation Plan. Public water and sewer are available to serve the subject properties and will be installed by the developer. The proposed preliminary subdivision plat meets all town requirements, and as such, staff recommends approval.
Okay, any questions? And if not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the Oaks at Kenneth Creek preliminary subdivision plat, sub-PR-2019-05, as presented and recommended by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and then the last item is for information. We have the planning staff report, and we're receiving it as information. Did anybody have any questions or anything you wanted to present to staff after reviewing that report, or give everybody an opportunity? Okay, otherwise I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Doesn't matter, we're gone. Thank you. We are adjourned.